Excellencies, Lady Ambassador, Mrs. Ambassador of Lithuania, Mr. Hans, Dr. Ambassador of the Netherlands, Mr. Jonathan Schreiner, Vice Ambassador of the United States, and any additional member of the diplomatic corps or consular corps whom I may have missed. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps at the very beginning, I will mention a few words of how it was that I somehow got mixed up in this whole little, very, very well-known now incident in a very, very big war. Now, I was at the time a young boy of 14, and it all started that my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, and their little 1.5-year-old child wanted to leave the city of Krakow, which was already bombed on the very first day of the war. And my brother-in-law wanted to take his wife, my sister, and their son to a safe place in the middle of Poland, near a city called Lublin. Lublin in those days was right in the middle of Poland. Now it has shifted. As lots of things have moved since. Now, while they were saying goodbye to my parents looked at me and said, look, why should a 14-year-old stay in a city which is going to be bombed as it is close to the German border? Take him along. So they took me along and I went with them. And this is why we somehow traveled together all the way in the direction of Lublin. Before even reaching Lublin, my brother-in-law was an extraordinary individual, without any news, without any knowledge of what was really happening. He had the feeling of what was happening on the roads, by seeing here and there people escaping in military cars, in diplomatic cars. He realized things weren't going well for Poland. And then he somehow realized that not far away from us, the Germans have already advanced in the first blitzkrieg of the world. He then decided, if we actually reached that place in Lublin where we had to stay, he then decided we are going to turn east towards Russia. But we don't want to get caught by the Germans. And if we get as far as the border to Russia, and the Germans go all the way up to the border of Russia, we'll cross the border into Russia. And I've pointed out to many people until before that everybody in Europe at that time thought Russia was a fantastic place. Stalin's Russia, everybody had everything, work, money, cars, luxury. The propaganda was really fantastic. Now what happened is, as we approached the Russian border, the Russians came into Poland from the east and divided Poland with the Germans, so that Poland ceased to exist as a country. And whether we liked it or not, we were in Russian territory. Now my brother-in-law realized very soon that this is not a place where we want to stay. Now to get out of there wasn't easy. So he thought a little bit and he decided he wants to go north, because there are still a few little countries like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia were at that time independent, and they had consulates there, probably an embassy still open, and perhaps one could get a visa to go somewhere. And so we arrived to Vilnius. Now, we stayed in Vilnius relatively short time, and then went to Kaunas. For one reason, we left Krakow in Poland to go to Lublin in Poland. So we didn't take our passports along. No one had a passport. And even to get, if some embassy or consulate would be kind enough to give us a visa, they had no document on which the visa could be stamped. And so we started looking around for possibilities and found that the British Charge d'Affaires in Kaunas could issue certificates stating who you were and that you're a Polish citizen. Now, receiving a certificate like this instead of a passport brought up various doubts. And very few people in those days were familiar with the term of now I've forgot that term, a passport, a document that could be used as a passport.
Laissez-passer or sauf-conduit or safe-conduit.
It is named after the gentleman who proposed it, I think before the First World War, Nansen, a Nansen passport. So that was really a document which could be used as a passport, as we found out later in the Dutch embassy, as well as a consulate, as well as the Japanese consulate in Kaunas. So first he got that document for everyone in the family, and we were a group of 7 people. And already at that time, a little difficulty came up. It was a family with the name Frankel. And here was a boy whose name was Shore. He didn't quite belong to that group. Who was he? Why should he travel with the Frankels? Perhaps they found him somewhere. Doesn't belong to them. So, in order to be able to explain things, he took me along. And that was very, very lucky for me, because I can remember that part of the story. Now, it took several months between the visa, between obtaining that document, the Nansen passports, and the visas. Things didn't go so very quickly. And it all went by with word of mouth. Someone heard something, most of the rumors were wrong, but there was a rumor that one could get a visa from the Japanese consul and first from the Dutch consul and somehow do something. So my brother-in-law went. He was told that first he had to go and get the Dutch visa so that he had a visa to some place, and that could give the Japanese consul the chance of issuing a transit visa. Both consulates, as far as I know, were the last 2 consulates in Kaunas. All the other consulates left. And I think that there must have been not only a contact, but agreement between those 2 consulates that they'll both issue visas with the hope that perhaps it'll help people. No one was sure of that. Now, at the same time, I must also mention that we were still in Russia. Although Vilnius was given to Lithuania by the Russians, which was very nice. Short time after that, the Russians decided they could take the whole thing back, and not only back, but the rest of Lithuania too. And they changed it into the Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic. and they were really running the country. And when the Russians ran a country at that time, I don't really know what it's like today, but I don't think it's much different. The attitude, the atmosphere was just sheer fear. Now it's difficult to somehow explain to people what fear really is. But I'll give you a little example. Perhaps that may give us some idea. And it's an example that I've seen. A family sits around a small table, having dinner of whatever they could find at that time in the various shops, and talk the way a family does. All of a sudden you hear heavy boots coming up the staircase. Everybody stops talking. The fork on the way to the mouth stops in mid-air. Everybody's listening. And then the footfalls stop at someone else's door. Everybody continues eating and talking. This is the atmosphere, and that went on for 24 hours a day with 1,000 little variations. Now there is also another little point I would like to stress. With very few exceptions, all the foreign consulates and embassies that managed to save a large number, or considerable number of Jews, had, shall we say, one thing in common, that they were a part of a chain. Very little and very few things were done by one man of his own. And particularly in this case, there were so many little stations along the way where each and every one of them could have completely cancelled the whole effort. It started with the British charge d'affaires who issued those Nansen passports. He issued them to people who simply said, "That's me." Very many people didn't even have a piece of paper. He nevertheless issued them with those Nansen passports. Then the Dutch consul with his visa, and then the Japanese consul, Sugihara, with his. And then came something very, very serious, which was probably the biggest danger on the way. Now we had passports, we had visas, but we were in Russia, and we had to get out of there. And to get out of Russia, you needed a special permit. And that permit was given by a very nasty organization, the GPU NKVD, with its various names. The Russian secret police was in charge of it. And there were countless of people who applied, and the answer was "Niet." No explanation, no reason why not. "Niet, you are not going." That's all. Somehow, a lot of people did get those visas. Sorry, those exit permits. But to give you an example of the problems, an uncle of mine who came late to Vilna managed still to get those visas, the Dutch visa and the Japanese visa. But when he applied for an exit permit, the lady there, Tobarish, what was her name? I forget names. Anyway, the lady in charge looked at him and said, "You're not going anywhere." Opened the drawer, her drawer, threw his documents into the drawer and said, "Out." He came home completely, shattered. What could he do? My brother-in-law decided we'll try something else. The next day, he took him along to get to this Mrs. Nina was her name, by the way, funnily enough. And Tovarish Nina talked very nicely to him. Somehow we managed to get on with her when he got our visas. And she asked him, well, why are you back here? He said, look, this is my brother, and he applied and hasn't received an answer yet. So Nina says, well, where are his documents? He says, in your desk. So she opened the desk. Ah, yes, I forgot them. He said, come back tomorrow, you'll get your permit. So these were the conditions. I, by accident, I don't want to make this a too long story, I, by accident, received 2 permits to leave Russia. I left on one. The second one was slightly doctored. The name was changed, photograph was changed. And a man called Asher Wiener left, a friend of ours, left on the second permit. I mean, nothing was stable, nothing was in order, everything was totally mixed up. And now I would like to finalize with one little story about Mr. Zoldendijk. After all, we are here in his honor. When we came to his consulate, there were people outside, but not too many at the time when we came in. But the consulate itself, which wasn't very big, was filled with people. Everybody was talking at the same time. And there was a total, complete bedlam. And then the consul Zoldendijk walked up to my brother-in-law and said, what can I do for you? So he handed over to him 7 such passports. Zoldendijk looked at him and said, 7? How can I haven't got time to issue one? So finally he said to him, in the corner there was a little table. He said, sit down at this table. He brought along a sample of the visa, and he said, copy that 7 times, I'll sign it. So our Dutch visas were handwritten by Zoldendijk. That also shows the total bedlam that went on at the time. But bedlam or not, we were amongst a few very lucky ones. Thank you very much.